Hey, we are back. This is the Musician's Personal Development Podcast, and I am CC Bass.
And this is Wil Cameron.
And we are two seasoned musicians here to bring you the actionable tips to get you to your best musician self. And
Absolutely.
Today we are talking about a topic that I don't really hear many people talk about, but we're going to talk about it today. And it is called playing with the weakest link.
Absolutely.
How do you get through gigs when you're playing with people where the skills are unmatched? But before we get into it, if you like what you see here, you've been watching our podcast and you want to see more of the different episodes, you want to be alerted of what's going on, don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube at MPD Podcast. And you can also find us on Facebook at MPD Podcast. And if you feel like dropping us an email, please do. We're at mpdpodcast@gmail.com.
All right.
So, Will, what do you know about the playing with the weakest link? What is that all about? How do you define that?
It's critically important. And first of all, it's really not that bad. It's not as bad as it might seem, because sometimes it may not be bad at all. It could just be a matter of compatibility or incompatibility. For example, you show up, you've got an upright bass, and you're playing with this group, and you thought, well, gosh, I thought it was going to be like a jazz upright thing, and they're punk rockers. Or I'm wearing a tux, and everybody else is wearing jeans, where I'm just not compatible with them. So, it has nothing to do with my lack of playing ability. It could just be that I'm just not the best fit for that band or that group or that occasion or that rehearsal at the time. So this is important to us, though. When you think about what we do as musicians, that musicianship, it involves this sharing. It's kind of like having a dance partner. So you can only dance as well as your partner does sometimes. And, we have multiple partners in bands usually. Or even if you're a solo artist, you're working with somebody, an engineer. So even if you're a solo act, you're working with people. So it's only a matter of time that you're going to encounter someone or individuals who are not exactly 100% compatible with you. It has nothing to do with whether you're a beginner or whether they're a beginner. It's just you're not compatible. So we want to specifically say this is not an attack on anyone's musicianship. This is not to make or to dissuade someone from learning to play, because it's not about that. These are just a few tips to help people to understand that if you continue to play, even in rehearsal, you're going to be in an environment where everybody's not compatible and someone's going to be that weak link. And we want to give you some actionable tips to be able to survive that as best as you can. So I know you've got a perspective of that as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because I have been there, I've lived it, and runs the gamut. So today is about sharing how we get through it and how we handle it in a professional way, and still, try to come across as a more likable musician. And so, this really could go so many different ways. So we're just going to put a few parameters around it so we can kind of put this in a structured way for the next few minutes. So, I will throw a few examples out there. So I'll give you a scenario where maybe you show up to a gig and you realize pretty quickly that there's somebody in the band that is very much a weak link, and you might be thinking to yourself, okay, well, this is how am I going to handle this to get through this gig? So you want to kind of take things and put it into perspective. And here's something I like to say, and something I learned is that no matter what we do in life, no matter where we go, it's not about being right or being wrong or about knowing more than the next person. It's all about how we make each other feel. Yeah. So the first thing I do is I work to eliminate any barriers of fear that people may have, because chances are that person is going to be very self-conscious. So the last thing I want to do is make that person feel even more self-conscious. And so I'm going to do things like encourage them and compliment them, because I want them to feel like they can be themselves. That's the best chance you have for that person to play their best. Because I've certainly been in situations where people have been pretty nasty to me, and I tell you that I don't feel like I can open up or play even the basic stuff when somebody's criticizing or fussing at me. So
you don't need all that other stuff.
No. So, and that just destroys a person's confidence, and that just it starts to drag the whole band. It's a ripple effect. Everything's a ripple effect. So if you smile, that the whole world will smile with you. So that's what I would do. And you just work to get through it. And you might have to adjust and pivot, but that's what it's all about. And then the second part, what I do is look for the opportunity in that. I try not to look at it as a miserable time or anything like that. I look for it, I want to help people anyway, so hopefully I was able to help somebody or grab something from that opportunity there.
Yeah, no.
How about you, Will?
No, you're spot on. I mean, you said it right at the beginning. The word you used was professional. And that remaining professional, I mean, that's like my actionable tip, remaining professional. That means like, we're human, right? So we react to things. But you don't need to make faces. You just go along with it to the extent that you can. Go along with it. I assure you, if the person who might be the weak link at that moment, I assure you, they are not trying to be the weak link. So they certainly don't need you glaring and looking over saying, oh gosh, what is he doing or what is she doing? You don't want to become complacent either, but, try to make the best of it and just go with it. If you don't make too much of a big deal out of it, it's not going to make it more complex for the person. And you're spot on with the fear thing. We want that person to be successful. They may not be a poor musician. They could just be having a really bad day, or they're just struggling through that. There are times that my arms and legs are not doing what I'm thinking, and it doesn't mean I'm a horrible drummer. They're just times that my sense of timing and coordination just is in another room at some point. So just remaining professional and just going for it with it and not making a big deal out of it. Just getting through it with as best as you can and remaining professional. We see actors doing this all the time because I think more people identify with actors than they do musicians. But if you also watch a very skillful musician, when they make a mistake, they don't say, oh gosh, I can't believe I made a mistake. It's how they recover and play through that mistake.
Exactly.
That's the difference between them and us. So for my second one, so this is interesting. We've talked about this, and I know you're all over this. We talked about this on a podcast. So one of the other things that I do when I find myself in one of those weak link situations is to share my motivation. And we have a whole podcast about connecting with the audience. So that emotional connection that we have, that positive energy that we have, the good vibes that we share, we could share negative vibes too. So we don't want to do that. Don't allow those weak link situations to steal your emotional energy and those positive vibes. I was in a band once where the musicians I felt like I was the weakest link. The musicians were absolutely phenomenal. And the vocalist, who was also one of the musicians, was not very good. So I enjoyed the experience because the musicianship was like spot on. It really forced me to practice and operate at my highest level. But the vocal part of it just wasn't there. But I wasn't dissuaded by that. I used the positive energy of the music, and it got us through a couple of really good gigs, and it was a great experience. So what do you think about that? Have you had any of those sharing the motivation types of situations?
Yeah, and that's what I do. I smile and I just kind of look for the opportunity within that and just try to help people. making people feel good is always a positive thing and a step in the right direction, because if you don't, it's going to go the opposite way. I'm going to throw another scenario at you, because what if the situation is where maybe you've got a week or 2 weeks up to the gig, and you've got a weak link that's on the gig that you learn about. How do you handle that? Well, actually, I'll tell you how I handle that.
Yeah, I had that on my list. I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you that. I'll share mine after you share yours.
Okay. So here's what I do. Basically, if I know that, everything really goes back to my why, my purpose. What am I doing? What is my overarching goal? And all my decisions and choices, what my actions, they should align with that why or that purpose. And so, what I love to do, I need to grow. I need to feel like I'm growing. This is my journey. Mm-hmm. It's going up. So I'm always looking to go to that next level. And if it doesn't align, then I just remove myself from that situation. It's not hard. I just politely let folks know, hey, this is probably not a good mix, but maybe I can recommend somebody. But I always try to leave it in a good place. But really, like I said before, I'm not for everybody. Everybody's not for me.
Right.
And that is chemistry, like Will, you were talking about.
Yeah.
How about you? What's your story?
It's funny. We're so much alike in that regard, especially as it pertains to the purpose. It's like I have to have a reason for being in a musical situation. If I find myself where I'm not growing and they're not growing, I'll be blunt. If I'm not helping them to sound better and they're not pushing me to play more and play better, then why am I in that relationship? There's no reason for me to be there. If I'm not helping somebody or if they're not helping me, that's just not a good spot to be, because complacency sets in. You start to not care. You start to not appreciate the musicianship of others. You start to not appreciate the audience. And sometimes it's your fault. Sometimes, in my situation, it was my fault when I was the weakest link in one of these gigs. And I knew that this is coming up. I just didn't prioritize things the right way. I ended up, I got through it, but it was embarrassing. I didn't get a call back again, and it wasn't the end of the world. But that's not the message that I want to send as a musician, and that's not the experience that I want other people to have. That's certainly not the way I want to be reflected to the audience either. So, but yeah, it is really uncomfortable. Normally, when I have an opportunity to do so, I like to learn from my mistakes and not repeat those events like that where I know that, man, there are times that a person is a weak link, or that you've got a weak link situation, and someone who maybe they don't execute well on certain songs, then sometimes you can kind of help them. As a drummer, I can help with transitions, I can convey different things, I can push and pull and do all kinds of things without even playing just playing a rhythm type of instrument. So there are times that I can. So I try to establish a rapport, and usually people go along with it and they accept what I offer on the drums. And sometimes it works, but then sometimes you just can't reach people, and when you're in that situation, you resort back to, let's just stick with the basics. We're going to get through this. We're not going to make a big deal out of it, and you will survive. You will live to play another day. So, those are not good. But everybody, you're going to run into one if you haven't seen one.
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly been on gigs where I'm definitely the weakest link, and I can't begin to imagine that. I cannot imagine it. Absolutely. There's all various different kinds of skills. I don't claim to be the best bass player in the world. There's not even such thing, but there are things that people can do, all kinds of tricks and flips and so forth that I may not be able to keep up with. And a great example, you may have heard me say this before. I like to use this example because it's a great example. I was on a jazz gig, and it was with some really good musicians. I think they were full-time musicians too. And they called up the tune Giant Steps. Okay, and I didn't know the tune that well, but I knew it was a very definitely musically challenging song. This was at the time. This was years ago.
Yeah.
But and I'm saying, well, yeah, sure, I can play anything. Just let's just go for it. And so here's what happened. The sax player started off the song by doing it a cappella, and because I didn't know the song, if you know Giant Steps, it's a very definitely an acquired taste, and it definitely off the beaten path of what's typical. And so he was playing a cappella. I had no idea where he was, and when the drummer came in, I guess he knew where one was and where the beginning was. He started off in lightning speed, and I could not hang on. I was all in different places and had no idea where the beginning from the end was. And so naturally it was a train wreck, and for some reason they kept going. They didn't just stop the song, and it was so humiliating. And I kept trying to look to the guitar player, trying to hear what he was playing, so if I could try to catch on, but I could not. He was just like, he was standing next to the wall, just going chink, chink. Sometimes, and you play chink another chord, and sometimes chink. So I couldn't keep up with that. So the point is that I really had to eat a dose of humble pie that day. I never got called back, needless to say, but the learning experience there is to understand what my capabilities and limitations are, and just be honest with myself, and be honest with the band members about what I can and can't do. If I don't know the song, it's not a good idea to play it, to perform it. Maybe I need to get familiar with that. And so that was my lesson there. Now, if I'm in a situation, let's say if it's a situation where maybe I know in advance, maybe a week or two out, that I'm going to play with these guys, and the first thing I would do is I would prepare tunes to make sure that something that it's musically compatible, but also too, let's just say if it's an ongoing thing, I talked about in a previous episode about having a mutual benefit. One of my values or things that I do is, every situation I walk into, it's got to be a mutual benefit. It's not me just benefiting and you not. You've got to benefit too.
Yes.
So it's kind of like even like a relationship. We both got to be. We might be like this, we might be like this, but we can't be like this or like this, because that's where frustration, resentment, and drama starts to happen. It's got to add to the table. Otherwise, you got to remove yourself from the situation. It's not a good situation. So I would just simply say, hey, this is not for me. But that's okay. Not for everybody. You're not. Everybody's not for me. So that's how I do. How about you?
Yeah, you're spot on with. I had to laugh with you hanging on. I'll spare you the story, but my scenario is very similar to yours, where a lack of experience. I was that drummer. I started out too fast. It's like 1,000 horn players. It was a jazz thing, and I just got tired. And it's like, it was noticeable because the drummer always solos last. The drummer always solos alone. You notice there's nobody comping. So after it seemed like 20 minutes of music going, way faster than what I wanted, I just had nothing left. And it was, a couple of people chuckled, the musicians knew what was going on. So, but yeah, it's bad. But you're spot on with, when you find yourself and you're in that situation, hit your reset button.
Yeah.
You are uniquely you. No one can play like you. So even if everyone else is like super duper skilled in your opinion, you don't have to copy them. You don't have to be like them. You have to be like you. So play like you play, and you can play like you better than anyone else, and you'll get through that. So our last one that I've got here it deals with feedback. And that's feedback to and from, because we're talking about in that weak link situation, you could either be the recipient, or you could either be giving it, or you could be getting it. So that feedback to and from scenario, that's important. Now, I have to put the caveat here. Timing is crucial. So when it comes to feedback, it's what you say and when you say it. And there are times that you don't want to give feedback, and like right before a gig or right before a significant event is not the time to give somebody feedback about something. At an appropriate time. What works for me and what I've done in the past, I have a friend actually purchased, CC, I bought your book for one of my friends. He's a musician, he's very skilled, but he's got like confidence issues. And he, in my opinion, he plays really well. And he would kind of beat up on himself, and he considered himself the weak link. But the music he would play was very difficult music. So he played very difficult music well. He didn't play it expertly. He played it well. He could play easy music really well, but he focused on really complicated tunes, things that you, beyond jazz standards, things that you really had to do. Mm-hmm. So I found a positive. The way I worked it, I found a positive. I told him something about himself that he didn't see musically, and I provided him constructive input with regard to the gaps and things like that I could see. And he was very receptive and grateful just because of how I explained it. I gave him a positive and told him, and I was honest. I didn't BS him or anything because, I mean, I couldn't have done that anyway. I think he just appreciated that I recognized where he was in his musician journey, and I spoke to him at that level. I didn't have unreasonable expectations of him, and he didn't have any of me, and it was a mutual respect. And he's a better musician for it. He appreciates your book. You signed it for him. You didn't even know who he was, but you signed the book and everything. You didn't know I was going to give it to him. So that feedback,
I'm glad I could help him.
Yeah, that feedback to and from that works for me, because then I think about I would want someone to treat me that way. If I was almost there, if I was like 7/8 of the way there, and I just needed somebody to provide me with some professional input, I would expect them to handle it that way. I would not want someone to take the drill sergeant approach and start to drill me and have me to do rudiments and tell me that I missed something, or I missed that break, or I should have done that. You know, that's not the way to do that. People don't learn that way either.
No. So that is the message of the day. Be professional. That's is really the whole key here. Whether you're in the situation, it doesn't pay to be a jerk. And oh, by the way, if you're acting like a jerk, that means you're covering up for something that you're insecure about. So, all right. So with that, want to just recap, because I think we're almost out of time here. So you want to recap what
so
the tips
recap. So when we have those situations with weak links, when you're trying to play your way through a weak link, the 3 things to remember are: number 1, remain professional; number 2, share the motivation; and number 3, feedback to and from at the right time.
All right, Dr. Wil, thank you so much for sharing your tips, and we hope that you got something out of this today. I know this is everybody can pretty much relate to this, and these are the kinds of things that we love to talk about. And actually, this wasn't a topic that Wil and I came up with. This was actually somebody recommended it to us, and I'm like, ooh, yeah, we have to talk about that. So,
yes, one of my friends did. That's just great, and we really appreciate that. So those of us those of you who interact with us, who give us ideas, we really appreciate them. And as we both have said before, if we haven't gotten to your topic yet, or if we haven't integrated into one of these, it's on its way. So these are very helpful. We appreciate that. We appreciate you listening. And we actually appreciate the feedback that you're giving us with the social media.
Yep, and you can, if you want to send us topics or give us ideas or share your story, you can email us at mpdpodcast@gmail.com. Again, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. Oh, and you can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at MPD Podcast. So with that, I think that's a wrap for today.
It's a wrap.
And I am CC Bass.
And I am Wil Cameron.
That's right. And we are 2 seasoned musicians here to bring you the best tips to get to your best musician self. And that's a wrap for today. And we are out of here. We got a new song, by the way.